Ahoy, peoples. The scene that you see before you is actually a website created out of WebGL through the THREE.js, I guess, open source WebGL system that was put out by Mr. Dube. Everything that you see before you has been painstakingly worked upon. Now, the particle system is actually simulated in Houdini, like the ones that are floating right to left, the little floaters that are coming off of the table itself, the little bits of dust, even down to the candle flame that you see flickering and moving around. That the particle system in the exporter that I wrote in Houdini would actually write frame by frame all of the information of the particles, rotation, from their opacity and their movement, along with a whole bunch of a sprite atlas that actually has a whole bunch of options that can pick different sprite shaders themselves, different textures. Now, on top of that, I have a whole bunch of OpenGL written shaders like the flickering kind of glisten that you see before you, along with things like this background that is written in OpenGL to make it look a little bit more like a website that when you're on it. If I were to open the tome, it will flip open and actually enter into the website itself. Giving you the ability of clicking through pages, being able to read what has been written, along with you can zoom in, pan around just by clicking and dragging, and the things that might have some of the restrictions that I had is the blend shape system for THREE.js is a linear system, and anybody that has done linear blend shapes knows the limitations of linear blending from one point to another. You need a whole bunch of interpolated shapes to blend between. So I wrote a custom blend shape system that would flip the pages based on a sine, cosine kind of blending, interpolation between point locations. Another thing that has been modified and added is a system to actually, lock the camera onto an object. Now, just before, the camera was locked onto the book. Now the object is locked to the camera. So you can better see there are, you can click on an object and actually kind of zoom in. Now the website is still in dev, so you can see the flame sort of moving around a little bit. But you'll notice that the flame is moving based on 4 different particles. If I zoom in, I can even see a little bit better. There's this bottom one, this kind of one in here, this one in here, and this one on top. Now on top of that is also the glare. The sort of halo around it is another particle. Now, some of the technical challenges that I had faced is actually making the candle itself. I didn't want to simply try to sculpt a candle and model it in 3D because I don't know, that wouldn't give me the same feel. So I actually set up a flip sim in Houdini to give me the sort of drawdowns that hot wax might kind of give you once it starts to run all over the edge. Certainly I took the mesh and I sculpted it a little bit nicer and made it a little bit lower polygon in Maya afterward. But actually I guess the lowering was in Houdini. The sculpting of certain aspects of it was in Maya, just to kind of get the UVs working correctly and everything else. So on top of that, I guess, the system of actually moving it around and all, along with a OpenGL shader, as you can see, the background sort of fades. This is rendering 2 different passes. One is the mask that you see right before you, where it as you can see, it fades out. The other one is the background it's masked over, as you can kind of see. Like the center candle isn't modified, but when you render it to screen, the OpenGL shader is darkening the background. So with all of this culmination of work to put into everything, I want to go over, I guess, some of the actual ins and outs that I had gone through with all of this. So one of the technical challenges that I had to face when developing this book, the tome itself, I wanted to have that vibe that it was actually handwritten. I wanted to have that sort of sense that what you're looking at has that little bit of imperfection. The letters feel a little bit varied. Here's a sense that the F's are different. The L's are slightly different. The E's are slightly different. That I wanted to have that sense that it was handwritten. Now, one of the other touches that you can kind of sense more when you zoom in is that it feels like it's actually written with a fountain pen. And I wanted to get that vibe. I wanted to capture that in every sense of the word. The character itself, Dees, as you see over here, was supposed to be, he was a character that I came up with years ago, but I wanted to actually have his personality in the writing, in his handwriting. And I stumbled upon the concept of graphology, which is the study of handwriting, that your personality actually shows through handwriting. So I wanted to develop a system that in its essence could basically capture the handwriting along with being able to easily grab characters and create a full alphabet, like test bad, test bad, test best, and that you'd actually have handwriting that looks viable for actual, like somebody wrote it. So the system that I wrote is a OpenGL, not OpenGL, I've been saying that all over the place, is a PyQt and Python written tool. So the interface is all PyQt. The slight little slowdowns of everything is simply because I want to give that feedback to users. If I didn't have that, it would run a lot quicker. But you notice I can just click and it updates. I can click on read a found character data and it'll load up, and I'll be able to actually shift and move around the character itself and then be able to update it. So if I were to say I want to put in all of the T's, and I run a filter on just T, I can load up the character, and you'll notice that I can actually shift the character just based on clicking and dragging, and you'll notice that it's updating right on the fly for me. Now, another aspect is after all of this time of going over trying to select characters over and over, sometimes you'll forget which characters that you actually have selected. Or maybe it's just that clicking and dragging, like that click and grow, maybe it's a little bit too slow. So I'd set up a system to make it a lot easier that I can set a little working area. I can grab a character, and it actually runs much, much faster. So I can actually get in there and see all of the updates on the fly and have it kind of grab the character for me. Now, might notice there are some issues where this is very chunky, and you would see that when you grab it. So I have added things like an add brush that you can go in there and manually kind of modify it a little bit, and then a remove brush that can manually as well kind of go in there and make it a little bit more streamline, and it feels better as you're working on it. And so with all of this, it creates a system that I can build out characters very quickly, be able to rotate them, be able to modify them. There was a lot of work spent on just writing the characters and the research behind graphology, let alone the writing of all of this in the long run. So if I were to even show you, yes, it's been updated because I'm currently working on the website, that there are, let's see, what is it? What is it? What is it? It is 5,738 lines of Python and PyQt, of being able to read the characters, being able to export them out, the ability of seeing everything that you see before you, sliders that are interactive that you can say, you can click and go -2 and it updates on the fly to have a automatically run for you. And there's a lot of aspects that I put a lot of time and effort into to make it user-friendly as much as I could. And I know these pages are still kind of being worked on, but let's say I'll grab this one just for the ease of it. If I just change, I'll make it 30% of what it normally is. It updates on the fly, and On top of that, I created a scripting system that I can actually modify exactly where all of the characters are, their sort of offsets and updates. You'll notice that there are percent. Okay, and I can't zoom in really, but let's do this. So you'll notice that there are percent signs like percent align, and percent 75 makes it 75% of what it normally is. So what you see here, like this SS, there should also be some single Ks. Like what they are kerning effects or the space size effects, but only for the next character. So if I were to, let's take another example over here, my philosophy on life. Okay, so if I were to say O, which is offset, and I'm going to say 10, which if you only give it one number, it'll assume it's in Y. And you notice it offset it -10 in Y. Well, +10 because it starts from the upper left for the characters in PyQt. But if I were to say offset the entire word, all of the characters following it will be offset by that 10. So let's say 50. Until I go back in and cancel that by saying offset. Or I can just simply say O, and that will return all of them back to normal. And, you know, maybe that's not cool because the text is on top of it. But it gives me the ability to offset and change kerning, and let's say kerning of -10, and you notice everything gets chunked together. So I created an entire sort of scripting interface system for page development so I can get characters and pages looking exactly what I want them to look like. I'm going to cancel out of this. No, I do not want to save changes because I modified things. But all of that development was across, I guess about 2 months of work, from using the ins and outs of figuring out the ways I would need pixel processing to work so I can actually, let's say, text-based viewer is, yes, that if I were to look for pixels around a given pixel, like it will search around and actually expand outward and grab them and add them to like the main pixel array that you're working in. So it's maintaining the pixels that you're working in, it's maintaining the edge pixels so that everything can be easy to grab and easy to use as need be. As for the website itself, everything is more thousands of lines of scripting. This is all JavaScript and I guess you know, some OpenGL, but I guess it's OpenGL ES for WebGL. So, you know, some of the syntax isn't the same as OpenGL itself, but that was something that I had taught myself over a course of like a month or two, and then I'm still learning, but it's something that I can easily jump into and make modifications because it's like any other programming language. As long as you understand like what precision is or what uniform or varying or attributes are of a vertex shader and a fragment shader, it's easy to just be like, oh, well, I'm working with a 32 float array. I know exactly how to address that because it's just an array, just like a particle system in Houdini or the pixels that I'm reading for pixel processing in my text generator app. So let's move on from here. One of the other challenges that I had was I created the Metal Asylum Productions kind of it's not really a company yet, but the idea of Metal Asylum I created back, I guess I was in high school and actually created this title for myself. And trying to find the 3D model that I created just to speed things up, and I couldn't find it, looking through all kinds of hard drives everywhere. But the only thing I could find was, as you can see, a image. So I brought this image into Houdini. I broke things apart. Jumped a little too far. I broke things apart so that I could read just the edge lines of the actual outlines themselves. So I did a system for just culling out, very simple culling out based on a tolerance. smoothing it to a degree, extruding it so I have a super high res version of the per pixel sort of text itself, and reduce it down so that I could create a a nice little low res game ready, I guess, version of the text itself. And from here, I actually brought it in to is this one the high res? Yeah, this one's the high res. I brought it into Maya, cleaned it up, just because I like how easy it is in Maya to just build out geometry as you need to, or need to delete edges without having an exorbitant amount of nodes. So bouncing back and forth. But I set up a system because I wanted to texture this, and I didn't have a great way of texturing it, but I UV'd it over in Maya. I got it. Laid out. Maybe the layout could have been a little bit nicer, but I thought, the A and the M are the most important, and some of the other ones. But it didn't. I guess I didn't care so much because of how small the text would be potentially. But I wanted to get it so that you can actually sort of see that there are highlights, sort of like this kind of metal sheen kind of look, like it was buffed out just on the top of it, I guess through usage or through getting thrown in a bag, in a knapsack or something. So with that, I was thinking that I can't find the peaks and the heights easily in Photoshop, in After Effects, I guess in After Effects too, but in Maya. So I didn't want to have to paint it all myself. So I decided I would go with a procedural way. And so with that, I'm projecting all of the meshes out into a 3D plane, into a 2D plane, so that I could actually bring in the peaks. I guess it's upside down, but I can bring in the peaks. So you can see here. All of the on this one is just the spikes. I have a couple of different working maps that I'm working with, just to get the peaks out of there. Add some flames or something. I like that kind of little spikiness of it, and set up a system that I could actually load it up and be able to modify it. I guess it's not in this one, but I did a similar thing in the Glow. Different file in the Glow itself. If I cull down, I don't need no ghosting. All right, in the Glow itself, I bring in the mesh. I cull down just the areas that I want, so I can create a low res mesh that is kind of flaring out. And I'm upside down. And so with that, I was able to create a couple of different setups, a couple of different groups, so it flares out a bit to have that kind of glistening effect that you see around the text itself. And with that, I wanted to be able to create a texture. The texturing, I decided that I didn't want any blues in there, just greens and reds worked great for what I was hoping for. So what I did was create the alpha map in the blue channel, and the blue channel was then converted over in OpenGL Live to be the alpha. So I read in the UVs that I'd UV'd in Maya, and I was able to read out all of the sort of height maps and the distances from the bottom of the mesh to the top of the mesh to create the sort of glisten that you could see. And you can see the blues in there, but the blues are the alpha. Let's see if I have the alpha set up on here. No, I do not, because this is the alpha when it turns out, because I decided I would be able to see it a little bit better. So that's the inside glow, and then that's the outside glow of both of these. There are two in here, just so you can kind of see the little movements in there, and some OpenGL to just basically pulse some movement. It's actually slightly warping the vertex locations. It's slightly reading from different areas, kind of like adding a sine wave to pulse through like some noise in there. So I thought that was a fun little creation on that. Let's see. Let's move over to sprite generation. Oh gosh, this is going to be long. This whole thing is going to be long. I feel like rambling about everything without edits is going to make things a little extratemporous. Extratemporous. I know that word, I swear. Extemporous. There we go. So once it loads up. It's still loading. All right. There we go. I think I might have a little bit too much going on, maybe. I don't know. Oh, well, this scene is huge. So the initial parts of... So the initial parts of the particle system, that's a camera. The initial parts of everything, because I decided to make it as complicated as possible, is the mesh itself, the flame, let's say, itself, was just a hair sim, very simple. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. It was a hair... That's not the hair sim. I just wanted to have a little bit of movement similar to a flame. And so with that, I found the flame itself. I wanted to add a little bit of a glow, so every frame it's sort of blending all the points together, but there's a slight delay, which is why I use a solver instead of just doing a SOP, so that the point dead center and that little dot that you can probably barely see, that dot right there, is actually smoothed out slightly, and on top of that, all of the, I think the normals are also smoothed out as well in the movement, so there's no real strong flickerage or flicking or like that, you know, those points that might end up kind of showing up because, you know, you're working with... Did I seriously just name it Geo? I did just name it Geo. Those points that you would get from a sim where, you know, maybe there's a slight calculation on like subframe that's a little bit too quick or something, and you end up getting those little one frame pops that I'm not a fan of. I wasn't good for that. The little dust coming off of the ground. You'll notice that this is running like super speed. One of the aspects that I wrote into the exporter, which is another fairly developed little export system, is scale animation rate. I'm running at 20% speed. So even though I'm going frame by frame and you see that they're going like hog wild, it's moving at 20% speed. Well, anywhere between 20 and 40% speed. So I decided I would set up a little system that you could be able to see the actual movements of where they're trying to be, and you can see the points as they rotate around. The blue line is how much rotation each particle is basically rotating in. And so you can see that some of them are actually rotating several times over, and that's across the lifespan of the animation that the particle is going through. The other aspect that you can see here is that there's like a brightness to the circles, all of the little circle representation. Let's see, ghosting all points. Yeah, let's just bring in the points. Is that the alpha? So you notice that they're black down here, and the alpha is 0. It's completely transparent, and as it goes back up, at the end of its life, you can see it go back to black. And you can animate that through a lifespan ramp. You can see it down here. There's some random seeds that you can add, so it kind of varies the alpha that's actually exported. And I keep on saying exported, and I keep on saying, like, the rotations and everything else. What ends up getting stored is frame by frame. If I get the candles, the closest one I have. If I get readout over here, you'll notice that there should be 5 values. One is X, Y, Z, and then the candle is a special case because I don't need the candle to fade, and well, I don't need this to be, yeah. So actually, nope. So I go to my JavaScript area, and I'll bring up the dust floaters is what I'm currently showing you. So this is actually exported. All of this code, or well, JavaScript, all this scripting that you see here is exported from Houdini. All I do is click one button. Everything drops in as the settings that I set up here are all the parameters from Houdini itself. These values generate rotation, sprite scale, resample rate, everything else is right up here. So like the animation length is 100 frames, and it's going to only generate a max of 35 particles, which I believe is gen count is 35 particles. All of these, the point count is simply how many points that you're feeding into it initially. So if, middle mouse click, 20 points. So all of this is generated out based on if I want the particles to generate lights, if I want the particles to have animation that is like alpha based. And you can see right here, I have the X, Y, the X, the Y, the Z, the alpha, and the rotation. And so the rotation is based on a positive negative. It's an additive rotation when it comes time in here. And so underneath the hood it's calculating the additive rotation from the actual particle itself. Now the export system is fairly obtuse for what it is, but I wanted it to basically do as much work as possible for myself. And so you can see all this down here is all the JavaScript that I wrote and then went in, modified, adding in the variables as I needed them. So it actually very neatly, very nicely exports the found information in a very human readable way. That could easily be modified, click a button again, and it exports. Don't need to modify anything, it just loads up into THREE.js exactly as you see it in Houdini. So the next step for creating all these particles is the texturing. And the texturing has been a culmination of two different projects that ended up merging together. But let's say liquid sprites, dust liquid. I went a little hog wild on creating a atlas that I thought was going to be something, well, in the future, everything that's part of this atlas I'm going to be using. But I'll point you to a few of the aspects of the atlas that I'm using for the site currently. I'm just viewing the alpha. All of these sprites are procedurally generated, or all of the sprite textures are procedurally generated. Okay, you know what? Stop cooking. I'm going to go to CA because I like doing a system where you have C, which gives you a flat color, because alpha, when you export it as a PNG, you're going to get like that weird kind of edge, anti-aliasing that has that color tone of it going to black in there, which isn't nice. I like that you have a C, you have an A that is absolute of what you need. The alpha is only the alpha. The color layer is flat color. Like if this didn't have any alpha, it would be generally just brown. That's it. So what you see in the website here, if I click out, and keep in mind these particles on the actual title itself are different, but I'll talk about that shortly. But these particles that you see floating around are actually these bottom two textures and these four textures right here. The Metal Asylum title are these four textures up here and some of these two textures down here. Now, I can easily pick on the exporter in Houdini. I can just be like, well, what textures do I want? And this was a fun build to actually set up a atlas system that displays the actual textures for you. Now the browns are really dark, and when you write out from Houdini to actually export these, it gets a little muddled just because it's merging in the alpha too. I could do some work on there just to get that working. But I can come in here and be like, well, I want those two textures down here, and I want those brown textures. So those are just the dust coming off the table. And if I go over to and if I want to talk about the floaters that are moving from side to side, these are the ones that I'm using here. So I'm actually using these four as well on the floaters that are moving from side to side in the scene. So the only ones that I'm not using right now are these two, which are going to be part of a jar that's hanging from the ceiling that is kind of a mystical kind of fairy-like kind of jar that I'm going to write a volumeric OpenGL shader for the tank of the jar, and I'm going to make it a tank that steps through and renders it as part of the tank. So it'll be getting kind of a volumeric particle system implemented in there based on where particles are and the volume around it. So I'll be able to give a glow to each of the particles that is a volumeric glow. Now, that's just for the sake of making it because it'll be fun to make. Now, the actual development of this Atlas system is pretty fun. I started making this just because I was making a Atlas system for my brother's video game, Blast Zone 2, and so I wanted to have a system that I could easily come in and modify a ton of attributes to basically create these looks and vibes of these kind of, you know, spherical sort of shaped, textured, really over-the-top textured Atlas textures. You know what I mean? The particles that are used to just have that color, that vibe, that feel, to make it very immersive as I possibly can. And so if I go, let's say, to one of these, just for the sake of showing. Now this is pretty bland, right? You know what? I'm just going to start with a new one. Atlas Builder. So I guess just before I had to build a few different tools. An Atlas Builder, which is the one that you're seeing, grab from the Atlas so that I could grab only the chunks that I want and to be able to move them into place. And then Atlas Rebuilder, which rebuilds the alpha channels, the color channels, and the blended alpha color channels, which is what I like working with, is the color and alpha blended together as it'll look in the PNG, but that the color and the alpha are separate. Again, like I was talking about before. So if I want to do a color ramp, I can, you know, very quickly get like, you know, a colorized sort of tones that, you know, you can start out very quickly to get something that's more like fiery colored or something, you know, this kind of weird eye looking thing, you know. You can easily jump in there and create something that starts like this, and you're like, you know what, you know, yeah, I'm gonna add some noise to it. And so if you go over to the noise tab, you can actually add in some color noise, and you can always blend it out if you like the kind of weird eye that I don't like. You know, I'm going to change the colors just so they're a little bit more, I don't know, dusty, embery dusty, I guess. Just because I'm being nitpicky here. So, yeah, whatever. So you can come in, adjust the noise. And if I go over to the actual color and alpha, I can adjust the alpha as well to have noise, so that you'll start getting kind of like these kind of, you know, chunk-like shapes. And to me, it's such a beautiful thing to be able to like, I just need a piece of dust. And for those working with sprites, you know, the more texture that you add, the more noise it looks like. That won't look very good. I mean, it looks good here, but on the grand scheme of things, like this one might end up being better because there's that slight, you know, just enough to give it some character, but there is the color tone change and the noise behind it. Whereas this one right next to it, it'll just look like noise when it's floating past other particles. It'll just choppy, kind of not very pleasing to the eye. So on top of that, you can always do subtraction, which, you know, subtract A and B. If I were to, let's say, I like this other atlas that I had up here, and I merge it in, I can actually blend in the two different atlases together. And I know this doesn't look like much. If I were to grab this one, should be a little bit more interactive. And you notice that now I'm getting a lot more organic shapes. It feels a lot nicer. You notice that that kind of noisiness that I was just talking about is gone. But that is also because there are other options in here, like the noise controls. Once you open that up, there's there's a lot of options in here, I'm just going to say, but it allows you to actually have a lot of creativity in the type of looks that you're getting, the sort of swirliness, the vibing of it all. You can change your seeds, you can change your amplitudes, you can change how much noise there really is across everything, make it really noisy if you want, or make it nice and kind of smooth, but to still have that kind of warping effect that I was just showing you. If I were to bring it back out a little bit, now it looks more like spirals that could be pretty fun to work with, honestly. But, you know, not on my current project, not in the Metal Asylum project. So with all of this, I can also come in, change how the noise works on the outside to get more like these kind of sweeping kind of swoops coming in there. You can even change based on the distance from center how much multiplication that there really is based on the ramp that you see right here. So if I were to smooth it out a little bit and make it a little bit more solid on the center, you're losing these sort of swoops on the outside. But if I were to go like this, you'll bring in some of them again. So you see that these kind of outside whoop-de-swoops are showing back up. So that's creating some cool effects. Now, if I really wanted to, I can just be like, you know what, the grid size, I'm going to make a grid of 1, which I don't, yeah, look at that. That's pretty cool. So you can make a single sprite texture if you wanted, and that's getting some really, look at that. It's getting some really cool bands around the outside, and it's turning into a mass on the inside. I like that. So I was working out of, was it 6? No, 4. Yeah. So I was working with this type of texturing, and there's a couple of things. You know, I'm going to bring this back over to Warple because I'm a fan more of that, and get some of the texturing back. All right. So, and add. Okay. So get this back to tones that I think, you know what, the tones, they're pretty green. I don't know. I don't like the green color. I can also change the HSV, the hue, the saturation, and the value of everything. So I can change the hue, I can shift that through, I can change the actual percentage of how much that's affecting it, so I can change like how much, you know, red that's getting, or how much green, or you know, the blues. Actually, the blue is pretty nice. Oh, ooh, bluey purple is pretty nice. But let's say I just want it to be a set color, like the colorize effect in After Effects, where it makes it a wash. And you can just click on Set Output Color to Hue, and that'll shift it to the tones of whatever the alpha is, whatever the hue is that you're working with. Which, I don't like this, because, you know, I want to have some depth to it. Ooh, that's even looking a little nicer than what I had just before. Let's say if I go just a couple more notes, ooh, maybe a little too far. Because I like that. It kind of has this kind of like, that's kind of ugly. But I like the blues and the purples. That has a nice little tonal shift in there. It's just enough to make things a little bit easygoing. You can change the saturation. You can change the value. Ooh, I like that. Offset the saturation. Now that's adding versus multiplying. So the the value, I can like really shift it off. But then if I add value, it just makes it bright white, or potentially bright white. Then you can also remap your alpha as well. So let's say it's a little too dense, and there is some data in the outside that I wanted to bring back, and then on the inside I wanted to die down. Ooh. Well, I mean, this is the percentage of alpha, like out of 0 to 255. So that's mapped to a 0 to 1 ramp, that if you modify the ramp, you can actually multiply how much brightness that you're getting. So if I were to turn this off, you notice I kind of pushed those colors a bit. I made them more vibrant because now the alpha is more vibrant in there. Then I can also scale tiles, and then this is sort of just like like each tile you can actually scale the size of. So if you did get something that was really tiny, or something that was really big, you can modify that without needing to worry about the grid size or anything like that. You can just come in here and change that, and you can get a little bit more data out of it, and make it nice and neat to whatever it is, whatever your desired effect is. So you can kind of tell I went a little hog wild on this one, but every single one has its purpose, every single one has its use, and all you do is just export it. And I'm reading it in exactly how it's exported out from the particle system. So those UVs of that image, which is shared in memory now, because all I needed to do is load that texture once, and now I can load, okay, I want the 0 to 0 UV, I want the 0.25 to 0 UV, and this got exported out of the particle exporter itself. Oh, okay, so I don't really know how far to go into all of this, because this project has been quite a bit of effort on my part. Learning Vellum to create a kind of brick pattern out in Houdini, doing the flip solver to generate out the candle itself, writing matrix math to know how much I'm grabbing and moving on the screen to actually rotate a matrix based on where you are in the screen when you grab it. I decided for this because as you rotate it around, it's because it's perspective and it's not orthographic, sometimes you get this kind of movement. And so I like the idea of being able to just grab the side. Now, everything that I'm going to be doing in the future is adding in like custom little icons for the cursor so that you can actually see if I grab over here, it'll rotate it. And if I grab it in the center, it's more of a free orbit kind of grab. And I guess, everything that I'm putting into this, all the work and all the effort is going toward a place that becomes a resume piece that it itself is a resume. Like the website is a resume. So, or portfolio. Yeah, portfolio. But I don't know. I guess I take a lot of longer steps on a lot of these to actually get things where I want them to be. Like, I want to make sure that like the candle's working for orbiting because I thought it would be nice, or that export system with the actual if I can even load it up, the text to the handwriting to text tool, or the text to handwriting tool, the text generator, actually worked, that I can load things up and export them and save them and have it so that I can share the project that I'm working on with somebody if I wanted to, and it all loads, it stores all of the data, everything is modifiable. It's a interactive tool that things update, like, I want a list of all of the actual text pieces that you can work on, and then you can just hide that and be done with it. Overkill? Yes, very much so. Are there easier steps that I could have taken? Very much so. But to me, it's more for the joy of it. There are always easier methods to do things, but sometimes the easiest isn't the most fun. I don't know. Well, I guess I'll take here to sign off. This is it's been Kevin at Zanga. I guess I design tools, pipeline. I do crowd development, effects work, clothing and hair, character simulations for 3D characters, for visual effects, graphics, and I guess this was a few of the tools and aspects that went into developing this website. And I guess I don't even know if I popped out of here yet, that you can even, this is a website, that it's something that could be designed and represented in 3D. Was just something I wanted to try and build and create something that, I can call my own, something I felt like that I haven't seen before, So this has been Kevin Zenga. I'm going to sign off. Thank you for watching this far. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Have a good day.